The coffee pot slipped from my fingers, shattering against the diner's cracked linoleum floor. A constellation of ceramic shards and dark liquid spread across my sensible shoes as my co-workers' frustrated sighs filled the air. The familiar scent of burnt coffee beans mixed with the greasy aroma of bacon that perpetually clung to my uniform. "Natalie, that's the second one this week," Doreen shouted from behind the counter, her weathered face creasing with disapproval. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, already reaching for the mop in the corner. My hands trembled as I cleaned up the mess, careful not to let anyone see the real reason for my clumsiness. At 5 months pregnant, the small bump was becoming harder to hide beneath my baggy waitress uniform. Just a few more weeks of tips, and I could finally leave this town behind. Start fresh somewhere no one knew my name, or his. The bell above the door chimed, announcing new customers. I didn't look up, focused on making sure every last shard was safely discarded. The muffled gasps of my co-workers eventually pulled my attention away from the floor. 3 men in impeccable suits stood at the entrance, their presence immediately transforming the atmosphere of the shabby roadside diner. They looked grotesquely out of place among the truckers and locals who frequented Eddie's all-night eatery. 2 of them scanned the room with practiced efficiency, their bulky frames blocking the exit. The third man, the one everyone was staring at, stood slightly ahead. My heart stopped. Even before I saw his face, I knew. The way he carried himself, like he owned not just the ground beneath his feet, but the very air we all breathed. The subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something uniquely him reached me across the room, unlocking memories I had spent 6 months trying to bury. Antonio Ricci, my ex-husband, the man whose ring I had secretly pawned 3 states over. The father of the child I carried. The most dangerous man I had ever loved. I ducked my head, frantically considering my options. The diner's back exit was through the kitchen, past Doreen, who was already fawning over the unexpected guests. The bathroom window was too small for escape, especially now. My fingers instinctively went to my apron pocket, touching the wad of cash I'd been saving. Nearly enough for a bus ticket and first month's rent somewhere far away. "Seat them in my section," I heard Doreen instruct Jenny, the new girl. Natalie's got her hands full with that mess. Relief washed over me. If I could just stay out of sight until they left. "No." His voice cut through the diner's ambient noise like a knife, deep, commanding, with that slight Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was angry or passionate. I hadn't heard it in months, but it still sent electricity down my spine. "We'll sit there." I didn't need to look to know he was pointing at one of my tables. The universe had always had a cruel sense of humor where Antonio and I were concerned. "Natalie," Doreen called. "Table 7 needs service. Now." Taking a deep breath, I rose from my crouched position, keeping my back to the dining area as I disposed of the broken ceramic. My mind raced through the limited options. There was no way Antonio was here by coincidence. Eddie's sat on a forgotten stretch of highway in a town barely on the map. I had chosen it specifically because it was the last place someone like him would ever visit, which meant he had found me, after 6 months of running, of changing my name and appearance, of sleeping with one eye open. With no choice left, I turned around, carefully adjusting my stance to minimize the visibility of my pregnancy. My uniform was mercifully loose, the apron providing additional coverage. The weight of his gaze hit me instantly. Those obsidian eyes, cold and calculating when dealing with enemies, but once, long ago, warm and tender when looking at me. Keeping my eyes downcast, I approached the table. One of his men, a new face I didn't recognize, slid into the booth first. Antonio remained standing, his tall frame casting a shadow over me. Up close, I could see the changes in him. The faint lines around his eyes had deepened. His once perfectly trimmed beard now had strands of silver. The gold wedding band was gone from his finger, replaced by heavy signet rings that marked his ascension in the family business. "What can I get for you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, still not meeting his eyes. "Sophia." The name I'd abandoned 6 months ago, my real name, felt like a slap. I flinched but remained silent, pen poised above my notepad. "Look at me." His voice was low, for my ears only, as his men examined the laminated menus with feigned interest. I don't know who you're talking about, I insisted, my eyes fixed on the notepad. My name is Natalie. Now, would you like to hear our specials? His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist with enough pressure to command attention, but careful not to hurt. It was the same calculated restraint I remembered, the control of a man who knew exactly how much force to apply in any situation. 6 months, he said, each word measured and heavy. 6 months of searching. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? I finally looked up, meeting the dark gaze that had once been my whole world. I had hoped, I admitted. Something flashed across his face. Pain, anger, or perhaps both. Antonio never showed emotion in front of others, another rule I had apparently made him break. The moment stretched between us, years of history condensed into seconds of tense silence. Then his eyes dropped, ever so slightly, to where my hand had instinctively moved to shield my stomach. His expression changed instantly, the controlled mask slipping to reveal genuine shock. His grip on my wrist loosened as his gaze fixed on the small but unmistakable curve beneath my uniform. "You're pregnant," he stated, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. I pulled my arm free, taking a step back. I need to check on my other tables. Before I could turn away, his hand was on my arm again, gentler this time but no less insistent. "Is it mine?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. The question struck me like a physical blow. After everything we had been through, everything he had done, he still had to ask. "No," I lied, the word bitter on my tongue. "It belongs to someone who won't destroy its mother." Pain flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by a dangerous darkness I knew too well. It was the look that had made grown men tremble, the expression that preceded violence that Antonio never delivered personally, but ordered with a mere nod. "You're lying," he said, confidence replacing his momentary vulnerability. "You were always a terrible liar, Sophia." The diner around us faded away, the curious stares of my co-workers and the other patrons irrelevant in the gravity of this collision of past and present. "What do you want, Antonio?" I finally asked, exhaustion seeping into my voice. "You disappeared with something that belongs to me," he said, his eyes flicking meaningfully to my abdomen. "I've come to collect." Fear coiled in my stomach, but I forced myself to stand taller. "This baby isn't property, and neither am I. Not anymore." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the kind that never reached his eyes. "You signed papers that say differently, cara mia. Our marriage contract. I should have known he would use that against me." Antonio left nothing to chance, especially not where his possessions were concerned. "Those papers also said, 'Until death do us part,'" I countered. "As far as you're concerned, Sophia Ricci is dead." He leaned closer, his cologne enveloping me in memories of silk sheets and whispered promises. "Yet here you stand, very much alive, and carrying my heir." The word sent a chill through me. In Antonio's world, children weren't just family. They were legacy, inheritance, continuation of power. A male child would be groomed from birth to follow in his father's footsteps. A daughter would be protected, sheltered, and eventually married off to strengthen alliances. Either way, my child would be born into a world of danger and moral compromise I had desperately tried to escape. "Please," I whispered, abandoning pride for the sake of my unborn child. "Just let us go." Something softened in his expression, a glimpse of the man I had fallen in love with years ago. The Antonio who had rescued a waitress with stars in her eyes from a life of mediocrity, who had shown her a world of luxury and passion she'd never dreamed possible. "You know I can't do that," he said, his voice almost gentle. "Family is everything, Sophia. You used to understand that." "I understood many things," I replied, "until I found the blood on your hands." His jaw tightened, the muscle twitching beneath his skin. We both knew what I was referring to. The night 6 months ago, when I had discovered the true extent of Antonio's business dealings, not just the gambling and protection rackets I had naively accepted as necessary evils, but the trafficking, the disappearances, the bodies that never surfaced. The night I had realized the beautiful cage he had built for me was lined with bones. "You never should have gone into my office," he said, voice dropping even lower. You never should have lied about who you really are." Our standoff was interrupted by the diner's door swinging open, the bell jingling cheerfully. A group of truckers entered, their loud voices breaking the tension. Antonio's men shifted subtly, their attention divided between their boss and the newcomers. "This isn't over," Antonio said, releasing my arm. "We'll continue this conversation somewhere more private." The implication was clear. I had no choice in the matter. Whatever freedom I had carved out for myself over the past 6 months was an illusion he had now shattered. "My shift ends at 9, I said, resignation heavy in my voice. A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his features. It was the smile that had made me fall for him in the first place, charming, disarming, with just a hint of the predator beneath. "No," he corrected softly. "It ends now." He turned to where Doreen was hovering nearby, clearly torn between curiosity about the drama unfolding and fear of the intimidating strangers. Antonio pulled out a wallet thick with cash and peeled off several $100 bills, placing them on the counter. "For any inconvenience," he said smoothly. "Natalie won't be returning to work." Doreen's eyes widened at the amount, any protest dying on her lips. Her loyalty, predictably, extended only as far as the next paycheck. "Wait," I protested. "My things will be collected," Antonio finished for me, his tone brooking no argument. He placed a hand at the small of my back, the gesture both possessive and oddly protective. "Now come. We have much to discuss." With his men flanking us, Antonio guided me toward the exit. The familiar weight of his hand on my back, the heat of his body beside mine. It all felt like stepping back in time, to days when his touch had meant safety rather than captivity. As we approached the door, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the smudged glass, a beautiful man in an expensive suit, a tired woman in a stained uniform, and between them, unseen but undeniably present, the child that bound them together. We looked like strangers, yet our history stretched behind us like shadow. Outside, a black SUV with tinted windows idled in the parking lot, a driver at the ready. Of course Antonio wouldn't have come alone. He never went anywhere without an entourage of security, a habit that had once made me feel protected, but now underscored the danger of the world he inhabited, the world he was dragging me back into. As one of his men opened the car door, I paused, my hand instinctively moving to protect my stomach. The late afternoon sun caught on the diamond bracelet still on Antonio's wrist, the one with our wedding date engraved on the inside. He had kept it all this time. "Why now?" I asked, a last desperate attempt to understand. "Why not leave us alone?" Antonio's eyes darkened as he looked down at me, something possessive and primal in his gaze. "Because everything that is mine eventually comes home," he said, his hand gently but firmly guiding me into the waiting car, "even if I have to burn down the world to find it." The leather seats of Antonio's SUV felt cool against my skin, a jarring contrast to the vinyl booths I'd grown accustomed to over the past months. Tinted windows sealed us off from the outside world as we pulled away from Eddie's, leaving behind the small life I'd carefully constructed. His men sat in front, the driver navigating the rural highway while the others scanned our surroundings with practiced vigilance. Antonio kept a calculated distance between us in the back seat, his eyes never leaving my face. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations. "Where are you taking me?" I finally asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Home," he replied simply. The word hung in the air between us, home. Once, that had meant our cliffside mansion overlooking the Pacific, all glass and stone and breathtaking views. The place where I'd spent 3 years as Mrs. Ricci, alternately adored and controlled, treasured and trapped. "That's not my home anymore," his jaw tightened. "It always has been." I turned away, watching through the window as we passed the town limits. The flat landscape of my temporary refuge receded, replaced by rolling hills as we headed toward the interstate, toward the coast, toward the life I'd fled. "You disappeared without a word," Antonio said, his voice deceptively calm. "Left in the middle of the night. Took nothing but the clothes on your back and your passport." A bitter smile touched his lips. "And my grandmother's wedding ring," which you pawned in Seattle. That was how I started tracking you, of course. The ring. I should have known better than to sell something so valuable, so traceable. But I'd been desperate for cash, for distance. If you knew where I was months ago, why wait until now to find me? Antonio's gaze dropped briefly to my stomach, before meeting my eyes again. I wanted to see what you would do, where you would go, if you would contact any of my competitors. The implication stung. You thought I'd betray you? After everything? You already did, he countered, anger finally seeping into his voice. You saw things you weren't meant to see, took what wasn't yours to take, and ran. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach. This baby is as much mine as yours. A baby you plan to hide from me. His voice had gone dangerously soft. My child, my blood, raised without knowing their father or their heritage. I was protecting them from that heritage, I snapped, from growing up in a world where violence is business and loyalty is bought with blood. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, perhaps, though Antonio would never admit to such vulnerability. Is that what you think of me? Of the life I gave you? The life you gave me was beautiful, I admitted, but it was built on a foundation of lies. You never told me the full extent of what you do. Would you have stayed if I had? He challenged. The question caught me off guard. Would I have? When we met, I had been a 22-year-old waitress with community college debt and dreams bigger than my bank account. He had been 30, established, mesmerizing, a businessman with old-world charm who left extravagant tips and asked for my number with disarming directness. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of luxury, private jets to weekend getaways, designers clamoring to dress me, restaurants clearing out entire sections for our privacy. I'd fallen in love with his intensity, his focus, the way he made me feel like the center of his universe. The signs of his true occupation had been there from the beginning, the constant security, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the business associates who regarded me with thinly veiled curiosity or contempt. But I had chosen not to see, not to question. The wife who knows nothing cannot testify to anything. No, I finally answered. I wouldn't have stayed, but that was your choice, to build our relationship on deception. Antonio leaned forward, his proximity making my heart race traitorously. Everything I did was to protect you, to give you the life you deserved. I never asked for protection, I asked for honesty. His hand found mine, his touch sending unwelcome warmth through my body. Even now, after everything, my body remembered his, and now I'm asking for a second chance. For our family. Family. The word resonated differently now than it had during our marriage. Then, family had meant Antonio, his aging father, a few cousins who occupied various positions in the business. Now it encompassed the small life growing inside me, a life that deserved better than the legacy Antonio would provide. You can't just force me back into your life, I said, pulling my hand away. Things have changed. Yes, they have. His eyes dropped meaningfully to my stomach. You're carrying my child. That changes everything. Before I could respond, the car slowed, turning onto a private airfield I didn't recognize. A sleek private jet waited on the tarmac, its engines already running. We're flying? Panic edged into my voice. Once we left the ground, any slim chance of escape would vanish. Did you think we would drive all the way back to California? Antonio asked, amusement coloring his tone. I have business that can't wait. As the car stopped beside the jet, the reality of my situation crashed over me. This wasn't a negotiation or a reconciliation. It was a reclamation. Antonio had found his runaway wife and the heir she carried, and he was bringing both back to where he believed they belonged. The door opened, one of his men standing at attention beside it. Antonio exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. For a moment I considered refusing, but the subtle shift in his expression, impatience shadowing the practiced politeness, changed my mind. I knew that look. It meant his legendary patience was wearing thin. I took his hand, allowing him to assist me from the vehicle. The evening air was crisp against my skin as Antonio guided me toward the waiting aircraft, his security team forming a loose perimeter around us. The casual display of power reminded me of what I was dealing with. not just my ex-husband, but Antonio Ricci, whose influence stretched across state lines and international borders. "My prenatal appointment is next week," I said as we approached the steps to the jet. A desperate attempt to assert some control, to remind him that my pregnancy came with responsibilities he couldn't simply commandeer. Antonio paused at the base of the stairs, turning to face me. "Dr. Mercer is already on staff at our home. She's one of the top obstetricians in the country." Of course, he had already arranged medical care. Antonio left nothing to chance, especially where his possessions were concerned. "I need my vitamins from the apartment." I tried again. "My clothes, everything will be replaced," he cut in smoothly, "with higher quality items." I bristled at his dismissal of the modest life I'd built. "That's not the point. Those things are mine. I worked for them." Something softened in his expression. "Sophia, you never needed to work a day in your life, not when we were married, and certainly not now." "Maybe I wanted to," I countered. "Maybe I needed to prove I could stand on my own feet, without your money or your name." His mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And did you? Prove it to yourself?" The question struck deeper than he knew. Had I? 6 months of minimum wage jobs, dingy apartments, constant looking over my shoulder. Was that independence, or just a different kind of cage, built of fear and scarcity rather than luxury and lies? Before I could answer, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen, making me gasp. My hands flew to my stomach as I doubled over slightly. Antonio's reaction was immediate. His arm wrapped around my waist, supporting my weight as concern replaced the cold calculation in his eyes. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" I shook my head, taking deep breaths as the pain subsided. "Braxton Hicks contractions, false labor. It's normal at this stage." His brow furrowed. "You're certain?" "Yes," I assured him, straightening with effort. "It happens sometimes when I'm stressed." The implication wasn't lost on him. His expression hardened again, though his supportive arm remained around my waist. "All the more reason to get you home, where you can rest properly." He nodded to one of his men, who immediately climbed the stairs ahead of us. "The sooner we're airborne, the sooner you can see the doctor." As we ascended the steps together, I was acutely aware of the contrast between us. His immaculate suit against my wrinkled uniform, his confident stride beside my hesitant steps. We had never belonged in the same world, despite the ring he had placed on my finger 3 years ago. The jet's interior was exactly what I would have expected from Antonio. Cream leather seats, polished wood, crystal decanters of amber liquid secured in custom cabinets, a shrine to wealth and power, flying 40,000 feet above the concerns of ordinary people. Antonio guided me to a seat, his hand lingering on my lower back a fraction longer than necessary. The small gesture, once comforting, now felt like a brand, a reminder that in his mind I still belonged to him. As I sank into the plush leather, exhaustion suddenly overtook me. 6 months of looking over my shoulder, of double shifts and sparse meals to save money, of nights spent restlessly imagining this very scenario, it all crashed down at once, leaving me hollow. Antonio took the seat opposite mine, his dark eyes studying every line of my face. A steward appeared silently, placing a glass of water before me and whiskey for Antonio. "You look tired," he observed, his voice softer than it had been since our reunion. "When was the last time you slept properly?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid me. This was the Antonio I had fallen for. Attentive, perceptive, seemingly attuned to my every need. "About 6 months ago," I replied honestly. A shadow crossed his face, "before you found the files in my office. Before I discovered my husband ordered the disappearance of an entire family," I corrected, keeping my voice low despite knowing his men were too well trained to eavesdrop, including a child not much older than ours will be. Antonio's expression hardened. "That family, as you call them, were informants. The father wore a wire to 3 meetings. The mother laundered evidence. And their son was being groomed by the FBI to infiltrate our organization from childhood. They were people," I whispered, "with lives and dreams, and they chose their path," he cut in, his voice cold. "Just as I chose mine, just as you chose yours when you married me." The engines roared louder as the jet began to move, taxiing toward the runway. Like everything in Antonio's life, even his transportation operated with military precision and efficiency. "Rest," he said, his tone softening slightly as he noticed my eyelids growing heavy. We have a 5-hour flight ahead of us. We'll continue this discussion when you're not about to collapse. As much as I wanted to resist, to remain vigilant, my body betrayed me. The gentle vibration of the aircraft, the plush comfort of the seat, the familiar scent of Antonio's cologne, it all conspired to pull me toward unconsciousness. The last thing I saw before sleep claimed me was Antonio's face, watchful and possessive, his fingers absently turning the wedding band he still wore. I woke to gentle turbulence and Antonio's voice, low and commanding, speaking Italian into a phone. For a disorienting moment, it felt like any of the hundreds of flights we'd taken together during our marriage, me dozing while he conducted business regardless of the hour or time zone. The familiar cadence of his native language washed over me, sharp consonants softened by the natural melody of his speech. Non mi interessa quanto costi. Voglio che sia fatto. I don't care how much it costs. I want it done. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep as I listened. My Italian had improved during our marriage. Another skill Antonio had insisted I acquire, along with wine appreciation and proper table etiquette for 12-course meals. Mia moglie torna a casa. My wife is coming home. There was a pause. Sì, è incinta. Yes, she's pregnant. The word moglie, wife, struck me like a physical blow. In Antonio's world, our separation meant nothing. The papers I'd filed for divorce 6 months ago might as well have never existed. Once his, always his. Preparat tutto, stasera. Prepare everything, tonight. I shifted slightly, and immediately his tone changed, softening as he switched to English. We'll discuss the other matter tomorrow. For now, ensure everything is ready for our arrival. The click of his phone closing was followed by silence. I felt his gaze on me, assessing, before his fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face with unexpected tenderness. I know you're awake, cara mia. His voice was gentle but knowing. Your breathing changes when you listen to my calls. I opened my eyes, meeting his directly. Old habits. A smile touched his lips, indeed. Outside the window, darkness had fallen. The cabin lights were dimmed, creating an artificial intimacy that felt dangerous. We were alone in the main cabin. His men had retreated to the front section of the plane, giving their boss privacy with his reclaimed wife. How much longer? I asked, straightening in my seat. About an hour, he replied, studying me carefully. How do you feel? I rested a hand on my stomach, where our child had begun to stir. The baby's kicking. Something flickered in Antonio's eyes. Hunger, possessiveness, perhaps even awe. May I? He asked, his hand hovering in the space between us. The question surprised me. Antonio Ricci rarely asked permission for anything. He took what he wanted, when he wanted it, with the absolute confidence of a man who had never been denied. I hesitated, then nodded, guiding his hand to the spot where our child was most active. His touch was warm through the thin fabric of my uniform, familiar in a way that sent unwelcome heat through my body. As if on cue, the baby kicked against his palm. Antonio's sharp intake of breath was audible. His expression transformed, the hardened mask of the Mafia boss falling away to reveal raw wonder. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I had married, the one who had once whispered dreams of family into my hair as we lay tangled in silk sheets. Strong, he murmured, his accent thickening with emotion, like a true Ricci. I withdrew from his touch, the spell broken. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. It doesn't matter, he said, surprising me again. Boy or girl, our child will be strong. Our child will be whatever they choose to be, I corrected, free from expectations. Antonio's expression hardened slightly. We all have expectations to meet Sophia. It's the price of the privileges we're born with. Privileges? I echoed. Is that what you call it? Growing up surrounded by violence and fear? I call it security, he countered. Power. Family protection. I grew up with none of those things, I reminded him, and his eyes darkened as they traced over me. You more than survived. You thrived. It's why I chose you. Your resilience. Your fire. His voice dropped lower, Your ability to look at a man like me and see something worth loving. The words struck a chord I'd thought long severed. Once, I had seen beneath Antonio's carefully constructed exterior to the wounded soul beneath. The boy who had watched his mother die of an illness they couldn't afford to treat, who had sworn never to be powerless again. I had convinced myself his criminal empire was built from necessity rather than choice. How naive I had been. "I saw what you wanted me to see," I said softly. "The charming businessman, the generous lover, the protective husband, not the man who orders deaths over breakfast coffee. You never questioned where our money came from," he pointed out. "The houses, the cars, the clothes, you accepted it all willingly enough." Shame heated my cheeks because there was truth in his accusation. I had chosen ignorance, had looked away from the red flags, had told myself that Antonio's business was complicated but ultimately legitimate, until the night I had gone looking for him in his office and found the files, the photographs, the evidence of atrocities committed at his command. When I discovered the truth, I left. I said simply, "That should tell you everything about what I can and cannot live with." Antonio leaned forward, his eyes intent on mine. "Yet here you are, carrying my child. Some part of you must have known we were unfinished." "The pregnancy was a surprise," I admitted. "I didn't know until after I left, and you didn't come back," he said, a rare note of vulnerability entering his voice. "You didn't give me a chance to explain, to make things right. There is no making this right, Antonio. What you do, who you are, it can't be explained away." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered well from our rare arguments. "I am who I've always been. The only difference is now you know all of me, not just the parts you found acceptable." The accusation stung because it bordered on truth. I had loved the parts of Antonio that fit my narrative, his generosity, his passion, his protectiveness, while ignoring the darkness that fueled them. "And now that I know all of you," I said quietly, "I can't unknow it. I can't go back to pretending." "I'm not asking you to pretend," he replied, surprising me. "I'm asking you to accept, to understand that everything I do, every decision, every order, every life taken or spared, is to secure our future, our family's future." His eyes dropped to my stomach. "Our child's future." The jet began its descent, the change in pressure making my ears pop. Through the window, I could see the glittering coastline approaching, the stretch of California I had once called home. "You can't keep me prisoner," I said, desperation edging into my voice. "Even you don't have that kind of power." Antonio's smile was gentle but resolute. "I don't need to keep you prisoner, cara mia. You will stay because deep down, you know it's where you belong, where our child belongs. And if I try to leave again," his expression darkened, "then I will find you, again and again, no matter how far you run or how well you hide. A child needs both parents, Sophia. I won't let you deprive ours of their father." As the plane touched down with barely a jolt, I felt the last of my hope evaporate. Antonio had resources I couldn't begin to combat: money, connections, manpower. If he was determined to keep me in his world, what chance did I have of escaping again? The captain's voice announced our arrival, and Antonio's security team reappeared, efficient and silent as they prepared for disembarkation. One of them handed Antonio a tablet, which he glanced at before nodding approval. "Your apartment has been cleared out," he informed me casually. "Your personal effects are being transported to the house as we speak." Anger flared within me. "You had no right." "I had every right," he interrupted smoothly, "as your husband, and as the father of your child." "Ex-husband," I corrected, even as I registered the futility of the argument. "I filed for divorce 6 months ago." Antonio's smile was cold. "Papers I never signed. Papers that were never served, as you disappeared before the process could be completed." Legally, he was right. In my haste to escape, I had left the divorce proceedings unfinished, a loose end that now bound me to him as surely as the child I carried. As we exited the plane, the familiar coastal air enveloped me. Salt and jasmine and money, the scent of the privileged California enclave where Antonio's main residence stood. 2 black SUVs waited on the tarmac, engines running, Drivers at attention. Antonio's hand found the small of my back, guiding me toward the lead vehicle. Welcome home, Sophia. The words sent a chill down my spine despite the mild night air. The drive from the private airfield to Antonio's, our estate, took 20 minutes along winding coastal roads. I sat in silence, watching the familiar landmarks pass by. The exclusive shops where I had once spent thousands without a second thought. The restaurants where maitre d's knew us by name. The private beach access points guarded by discreet security. It was like stepping back in time, except for the persistent reminder of change pressed against my abdomen. When the gates of the estate came into view, my breath caught involuntarily. The sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion stood exactly as I remembered it, perched on the cliff overlooking the Pacific, illuminated by strategic lighting that showcased its elegant lines without ostentation. Gardens cascaded down the terraced property, a riot of colorful blooms even in the darkness. Home. Once. Prison. Now. As the cars pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed subtle changes. Additional security cameras disguised as light fixtures, new guard posts at strategic points along the perimeter wall, more personnel than I remembered patrolling the grounds. Antonio had increased security because of what I had discovered, or in anticipation of my return. The car stopped at the front entrance, where a line of staff waited to greet us. Antonio exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. I ignored it, climbing out under my own power, conscious of the stains on my waitress uniform, the scuffed shoes, the physical evidence of the life I had built away from luxury. Mrs. Abernathy, the housekeeper who had managed the estate for as long as I had known Antonio, stepped forward. Her eyes widened briefly at the sight of my condition, before professional composure reasserted itself. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ricci," she said, her British accent as crisp as I remembered. "Your rooms are prepared." "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy," I replied automatically, falling back into the politeness that had been expected of me as Antonio's wife. Antonio's hand came to rest possessively at the small of my back. "My wife is exhausted from the journey. Please ensure she has everything she needs." "Of course, sir." Mrs. Abernathy gestured to the younger staff members, who immediately began unloading luggage. Not mine, as I had none, but Antonio's, and several shopping bags with designer labels I recognized. "I've taken the liberty of ordering some appropriate clothing," Antonio explained, noting my gaze. "Your former wardrobe would no longer fit, given your condition." The thoughtfulness of the gesture was undermined by its presumption. He had already begun rebuilding my life here, assuming my compliance, my surrender. As we entered the grand foyer, with its soaring ceilings and marble floors, the contrast between this world and the one I had inhabited for the past 6 months was jarring. Everything gleamed with wealth and power. The artwork worth millions, the antiques collected over generations, the subtle security measures that ensured it all remained protected. "Nothing has changed," I murmured, almost to myself. Antonio heard me, his hand tightening slightly at my waist. "Everything has changed," he corrected. "You're carrying my child, and I know exactly what you're capable of now." The warning in his voice was unmistakable. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired, especially for a man whose business relied on loyalty above all else. As Mrs. Abernathy led us toward the sweeping staircase, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the ornate mirror that dominated one wall. The woman staring back was a stranger in familiar surroundings, her eyes harder, her stance more guarded, her body changed by the life growing inside her. I wasn't the same woman who had fled this house 6 months ago. The question was whether that difference would be enough to secure my freedom and my child's future. A second time, Mrs. Abernathy showed me to the master suite, the rooms Antonio and I had once shared. Everything was exactly as I remembered, from the custom California king bed with its hand-carved Italian headboard to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the ocean. The only differences were the fresh flowers on every surface and the subtle modifications to accommodate my pregnancy. Extra pillows on the bed, a small refrigerator stocked with electrolyte drinks and healthy snacks, a stack of pregnancy books on the nightstand. "Dr. Mercer will be here first thing tomorrow morning," Mrs. Abernathy informed me, as she opened the walk-in closet to reveal an array of new maternity clothes. all in the colors and styles I had once favored. Mr. Ricci was most insistent that you be examined immediately. Of course he was, I murmured, running my fingers over the silks and cashmeres that had replaced the cotton and polyester blends I'd grown accustomed to. Every garment still had its tags: Prada, Gucci, Armani, Dior, silent reminders of the wealth that had once been my everyday reality. "Would you like a bath drawn?" Mrs. Abernathy asked, professional as ever despite the obvious questions she must have had about my absence and return. "Please," I agreed, suddenly desperate to wash away the remnants of my other life. "And could you bring up some tea? Chamomile with honey, as you used to take it," she confirmed with a nod, already moving toward the ensuite bathroom. "I'll have Marta bring up a light supper as well. You must be famished." I was, I realized. In the chaos of being discovered and whisked away, I hadn't eaten since my brief lunch break at the diner, hours ago. "Thank you," I said, genuinely grateful for her efficiency and lack of prying questions, as Mrs. Abernathy busied herself with the bath. I wandered to the windows, gazing out at the moonlit ocean. The view had once been my favorite part of this house. The endless horizon, the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs below. Now, it felt like the edge of the world, a beautiful boundary to my gilded cage. "Your bath is ready, Mrs. Ricci," Mrs. Abernathy announced, emerging from the bathroom. "Will there be anything else?" "No, thank you," I replied, then hesitated. Mrs. Abernathy, "Where is Mr. Ricci?" "In his office," she answered, her expression carefully neutral. "He mentioned he had calls to make and would join you later for dinner. Business calls, no doubt, reasserting control over whatever operations had been neglected during his search for me." I nodded, dismissing her with a smile that felt foreign on my face. When she was gone, I locked the bedroom door. A futile gesture, I knew. Antonio would have keys to every room in the house, but it gave me a momentary sense of control. The bathroom was a sanctuary of marble and glass, the massive, soaking tub filled with steaming water scented with the lavender oil I had once used religiously. I stripped off my waitress uniform, folding it neatly despite its worn state. It represented 6 months of independence, however meager. I couldn't bring myself to simply discard it. Lowering myself into the hot water, I felt my muscles relax for the first time since Antonio had walked into the diner. The baby shifted inside me, responding to the change in temperature and my gradually unwinding tension. "It's okay," I whispered, hands cradling my belly beneath the water. "We're going to be okay." But were we? Antonio had found us once. He would find us again if I ran. And now that he knew about the pregnancy, his determination would only intensify. A child, an heir, was irreplaceable in his world, more valuable than any business asset or territory. As I soaked, I forced myself to think logically. Antonio had all the power here. Legal, financial, physical. My options were limited, especially in my condition. I couldn't run again, not immediately. I would need resources, planning, assistance. All things I lacked at the moment, which meant I needed to play along. To make Antonio believe I was reconciling to our reunion, at least until I could formulate a plan. By the time I emerged from the bath, a tray had been left outside the bedroom door, a light supper of clear soup, crusty bread, and fresh fruit, along with the promised chamomile tea. My stomach growled at the sight. I brought the tray inside, relocking the door before settling on the bed to eat. The food was exquisite, a sharp contrast to the greasy diner fare and cheap takeout that had sustained me for months. Each bite reminded me of the life I had left behind, the privilege, the comfort, the ease that came with being Antonio Ricci's wife. And the cost of that ease, the blood price paid for every luxury. I had nearly finished eating when a soft knock came at the door. Not Mrs. Abernathy's polite tap, but the confident rhythm I knew belonged to Antonio. "Sophia." His voice was low, controlled. "Open the door." I considered refusing, but what would that accomplish beyond antagonizing him? Setting aside the tray, I moved to the door and unlocked it. Antonio stood in the hallway, changed from his travel clothes into black pants and a crisp white shirt, open at the collar. He'd showered as well, his dark hair still damp, the scent of his cologne subtler than before. "May I come in?" he asked, the formality at odds with the fact that this had been his bedroom long before it was ever mine. I stepped aside, allowing him entry before retreating to the seating area by the windows. Antonio followed, his eyes taking in my appearance, the simple silk robe I'd found in the bathroom, my damp hair loose around my shoulders, my face scrubbed clean of makeup. "You look better," he observed, taking the chair opposite mine. "More like yourself." "Which self would that be?" I asked quietly. "The waitress or the Mafia wife?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You know which one you truly are." I said nothing, waiting for him to reveal the purpose of his visit. Antonio was not a man who engaged in small talk or casual conversation. Every interaction served a specific aim. "Dr. Mercer will be here at 9 tomorrow, he said finally. "I want a complete examination, ultrasound, blood work, whatever is necessary to ensure both you and the baby are healthy. I've had regular prenatal care," I assured him. "Everything is progressing normally." "With what kind of doctor?" he challenged. "In what kind of facility? On a waitress's salary?" The condescension in his voice stung. "The kind of care millions of women receive every day. Not everyone has access to private physicians who make house calls." "And not everyone is carrying a Ricci heir," he countered, leaning forward. "Our child deserves the best of everything, Sophia. Surely we can agree on that much." "Our child deserves safety and stability," I said, resting my hand protectively on my stomach. "Love and acceptance. Things money can't buy." Antonio's eyes followed my movement, lingering on the visible curve beneath my robe. "All of which I intend to provide, along with every advantage my position affords." "Your position is what concerns me," I replied. "The dangers that come with it, the moral compromise." "You speak as though I'm a common criminal," he said, irritation coloring his tone. "The Ricci family has been in this business for generations. We have code, structure, principles. Principles that include murder," his expression hardened. "Principles that include protecting what's ours. Family above all else." "Is that what you told yourself when you ordered that family killed?" I challenged. The question that had haunted me for months finally spoken aloud, that it was for the protection of your own. Antonio was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but intense. "What you found in my office, the file on the Marconi family, it wasn't what you think. Yes, I ordered them removed, but not killed." "Removed?" I echoed incredulously. "Is that the euphemism we're using?" "Relocated," he clarified. "New identities, new lives, far from here, away from both our organization and the FBI that was using them." I stared at him, disbelief warring with a desperate desire to believe. "You expect me to believe you let informants live? That you showed mercy to people who betrayed you?" "Not mercy," he corrected. "Strategy. Killing federal informants brings heat that even my connections can't dispel, especially when children are involved. So instead you..." "What? Gave them new identities? Set them up somewhere else?" Antonio nodded. "Montana. A small ranch. Different names, different appearances, but alive. The FBI believes they're dead, a convenient fiction that serves everyone's purposes." "Why would you do that?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this information with the brutal reality I thought I had discovered. "Because despite what you think of me, I'm not a monster," he said simply. "I do what's necessary to protect our interests, but I don't kill indiscriminately, especially not children." I wanted to believe him. God help me. I wanted it to be true. But Antonio was also a consummate liar when it served his purposes. "Prove it," I challenged. "Show me they're alive." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I thought you might say that." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing his phone. After a few taps, he handed it to me. "Live feed from the security cameras on their property. Updated daily." The screen showed a nighttime view of a modest ranch house, lights glowing warmly in the windows. The timestamp in the corner showed today's date. As I watched, a figure moved past one of the windows. A woman, her silhouette matching the one I remembered from the file. "They're alive," I whispered, relief washing through me despite my lingering doubts. As I said, Antonio took back the phone. What you saw in my office was documentation of their extraction, not their execution. You ran before I could explain. There were other files, I said, remembering the images that had haunted my nightmares. Other incidents. Some of which were exactly what they appeared to be. He admitted without pretense. Our world has real consequences for betrayal, Sophia. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise, but I'm selective about the penalties I impose, and I have lines I don't cross. I searched his face, looking for the tells of deception I had learned to recognize during our marriage. I found none, but Antonio had always been exceptional at controlling his expressions when necessary. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I want you to stay, he said simply. Not as a prisoner, but as my wife, as the mother of my child. And for that to happen, you need to understand who I really am, not who you fear I am. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, but years of deception couldn't be undone by a single conversation. I need time, I said finally, to process this, to decide what I believe. Antonio nodded, accepting my response with unexpected grace. Time you have. What you don't have is the option to disappear again. His voice hardened slightly. I won't lose you or our child a second time, Sophia. The warning was clear, wrapped though it was in concern rather than threat. I understand, I replied, because I did. Whatever his other qualities, Antonio's devotion to family was absolute and non-negotiable. He rose from his chair, towering over me for a moment before extending his hand. Come. There's something else I want to show you. I hesitated, then placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me to my feet. His fingers entwined with mine, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache with confused longing. Antonio led me from the master suite down the hallway to a door that had once been a guest bedroom. He paused, something almost like nervousness crossing his face before he turned the handle and guided me inside. The room had been transformed. Soft yellow walls replaced the former neutral tones. A white crib with delicate Italian carving stood in the center, draped with fine linens. A rocking chair by the window overlooked the ocean, and shelves lined with children's books, classics in multiple languages, covered one wall. You built a nursery, I whispered, overwhelmed by the tangible evidence that Antonio had not only accepted the pregnancy but embraced it wholeheartedly. I started it the day after I confirmed you were carrying our child, he admitted, 3 months ago. You've known that long? I turned to him, shocked. My sources found you 4 months after you left, he explained. When I learned of your condition, I needed time to process it, to prepare. So you watched me, I realized. All that time you knew where I was, what I was doing. I had you protected, he corrected. Guards you never saw, making sure no harm came to you or our baby while I arranged for your return. The revelation sent a chill through me. All those months I had thought myself hidden. I had been observed, monitored, protected without my knowledge or consent. This nursery, I said, changing the subject before my anger could rise. It's beautiful, but presumptuous. Antonio's expression softened as he looked around the room. Not presumptuous, hopeful. His eyes found mine again, unexpectedly vulnerable. I never stopped believing you would come home, Sophia, that we would raise our child together. I spent that first night back in Antonio's home alone in the master suite, door locked, despite knowing it offered only the illusion of privacy. Sleep came in fitful bursts, my dreams filled with conflicting images. Antonio as the monster I had feared, Antonio as the complex man he claimed to be. The child within me, caught between these two versions of its father. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the promised arrival of Dr. Mercer, a poised woman in her 50s, whose credentials included training at Johns Hopkins, and a clientele comprised exclusively of the extremely wealthy and powerful. Everything looks perfect, she announced after a thorough examination that included a 3D ultrasound on equipment that had been delivered to the house overnight. Would you like to know the gender? I glanced at Antonio, who had remained in the room throughout the examination, his eyes never leaving my face. The decision was symbolic, our first as reunited parents. Yes, he said. At the same moment I nodded. It's a girl. Dr. Mercer revealed, smiling as she turned the monitor so we could both see the unmistakable evidence. Perfectly formed and developing right on schedule. A daughter. I watched Antonio's face transform with wonder, emotion breaking through his carefully maintained control. In the criminal hierarchy he inhabited, sons were traditionally valued above daughters, prized as heirs and successors, yet the joy in his eyes seemed untainted by any hint of disappointment. "A daughter," he repeated, his voice thick. His hand found mine on the examination table, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that belied his strength. "She'll be as beautiful and strong as her mother." The moment of connection between us was interrupted by Dr. Mercer's professional efficiency, as she provided detailed instructions for the remainder of my pregnancy. Diet recommendations, exercise guidelines, warning signs to watch for. Antonio absorbed every word with the same intense focus he applied to business negotiations, occasionally asking questions that revealed how extensively he had already researched prenatal care. After the doctor left, we shared a quiet breakfast on the terrace overlooking the ocean. The morning was perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the rhythmic sound of waves breaking against the cliffs below. In another life, it might have been idyllic. "I need to go into the city for meetings," Antonio said, as staff cleared away our plates. "Business that can't be postponed." I nodded, unsurprised. Even during our marriage, Antonio's work had been constant, demanding, inescapable. "What am I supposed to do while you're gone?" I asked. "I assume I'm not permitted to leave." His expression hardened slightly at my tone. "You're not a prisoner, Sophia. The estate is yours to enjoy. The pool, the gardens, the private beach access. Your art studio remains untouched if you wish to paint." His voice softened. "But no, I would prefer you not leave the property. Not yet. It's for your protection as much as anything else." "Protection from what?" I challenged. "The consequences of your business." Antonio sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Yes," he admitted, "and from your own impulsiveness. I need to know you're safe, both of you, while we adjust to this new reality." "And how long will this adjustment period last? A week? A month? The rest of our lives?" "That depends largely on you," he replied, standing from the table. "On whether you can accept who I am, what I do, and your place in it all. And if I can't." His eyes met mine, dark and resolute. "Then we find a compromise. But separation is not an option. Not with our daughter between us." After he left, I spent hours reacquainting myself with the estate, the sprawling gardens with their Mediterranean flora, the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean horizon, the private path that wound down the cliffside to the secluded beach below. Everywhere I went, I noted the subtle security measures that hadn't been present before my departure. Additional cameras, guards positioned at strategic points, the reinforced perimeter fencing disguised by lush landscaping. A beautiful prison, but a prison nonetheless. In the afternoon, I found myself in my old art studio, a converted sunroom with northern light perfect for painting. Antonio had spoken the truth. Everything remained exactly as I had left it 6 months ago. Half-finished canvases on easels, brushes cleaned and waiting in their holders, tubes of expensive paint arranged by color in custom-built drawers. I picked up a brush, its weight familiar in my hand. Before meeting Antonio, I had been a waitress with an art degree and dreams of gallery shows that never materialized. During our marriage, he had encouraged my talent, hiring tutors, buying supplies, arranging for private showings of my work to friends and business associates who inevitably purchased pieces at inflated prices. Another form of control, I now recognized, keeping me occupied, validated, dependent on the world he created around me. I set the brush down without painting a stroke. That evening, Antonio returned later than promised, his expression tense in a way I remembered well. Business complications, problems requiring his personal attention. In the past, I would have asked no questions, accepting his vague explanations about meetings and negotiations, without pressing for details I supposedly wouldn't understand. Now, I watched him carefully as we dined by candlelight on the terrace, the meal prepared by the private chef who had once designed menus around my pregnancy cravings, before I even recognized them myself. There was an incident today, Antonio said finally, surprising me with his voluntarily offered information, an attempted encroachment on our territory by the Castellani family. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The Castellanis were rivals I remembered from whispered conversations and abruptly ended phone calls during our marriage. What kind of encroachment? I asked cautiously. Antonio studied me for a moment, seemingly weighing how much to share. They tried to move product through our port. When confronted, they claimed ignorance of territorial boundaries. And how did you respond? With proportionate measures, he replied evenly. Their shipment was confiscated. The drivers were released unharmed, but with a message for Salvador Castellani. What message? A cold smile touched his lips. That some lines should not be crossed, especially not now, when I have so much to protect. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that, but something had changed between us. A small crack in the wall of secrecy Antonio had maintained throughout our marriage. Whether it represented trust or simply a strategic adjustment to keep me from running again, I couldn't be sure. Days passed in similar fashion. Antonio would leave for business, returning in the evenings to share meals during which he gradually revealed more about his operations than he ever had before. Not specifics. Never names or dates or details that could be legally damaging, but enough for me to understand the structure, the rules, the boundaries that governed his world. I learned that he did indeed have lines he wouldn't cross. No involvement in human trafficking, no dealing with terrorists, no targeting of law enforcement families regardless of professional conflicts. His business focused primarily on gambling, protection, strategic investments in legitimate businesses, and the importation of certain controlled substances, traditional Mafia endeavors that, while illegal, operated according to an established code. A week after my return, as we sat in the nursery discussing color schemes and furniture arrangements, I asked the question that had been building since that first night. Why are you telling me all this now? About your business, your decisions, the inner workings of the organization. You never shared these things before. Antonio was silent for a long moment, his hand absently stroking the fine wood of the crib that would soon hold our daughter. Because your ignorance nearly destroyed us, he said finally. You ran because you discovered things you weren't prepared to understand, without context or explanation. And you think context makes it better? I challenged. More acceptable? I think truth is preferable to idealized fiction, he countered. I'd rather you see me clearly, all of me, than love a sanitized version that doesn't exist. Who says I love you at all anymore? The words came out sharper than intended, defensive in their haste. Antonio's eyes met mine, unwavering. Your body says it, even when your words deny it, the way you respond when I'm near, when I touch you. His voice dropped lower, the way you watch me when you think I don't notice. Heat rushed to my cheeks, because he wasn't wrong. Despite everything, my traitorous body remembered his, the comfort of his embrace, the security of his presence, the passion we had shared. Hormones, I told myself. Pregnancy making me emotional, vulnerable. Physical attraction isn't love, I managed. No, he agreed, but it's a start. A foundation we can build on again. As weeks passed, my resistance began to waver, not because Antonio was particularly persuasive in his arguments, but because of the consistency of his actions. He never pressed for physical intimacy beyond the occasional touch of my stomach to feel our daughter kick. He arranged for prenatal yoga instructors to come to the house, ordered books on natural childbirth when I expressed interest, and spent hours each evening reading aloud to my belly in both English and Italian. I found myself watching him in these moments, seeing glimpses of the man I had married, passionate, devoted, capable of tenderness that few outside our private world would ever witness. One night, unable to sleep as our daughter performed what felt like gymnastics routines within me, I wandered to Antonio's study and found him still working despite the late hour. Maps and documents covered his desk, and he was speaking rapid-fire Italian into a secure phone line. When he saw me in the doorway, he immediately ended the call. What's wrong? He asked, instantly alert. Is it the baby? Just restless, I assured him, one hand rubbing my now prominent belly. She's practicing for the Olympics in there. A smile softened his features as he crossed the room to me. Without asking, he placed his hand on my stomach, waiting until he felt the forceful kick that had been keeping me awake. She has your spirit, he murmured. "And your stubbornness," I countered, wincing as she delivered another jab to my ribs. Antonio's laugh was unexpected, genuine in a way I had almost forgotten. "Then God help us both when she's a teenager." The casual reference to our future, years ahead, raising our daughter together, hung in the air between us. Neither of us acknowledged it directly, but something shifted in that moment, a possibility I had been resisting since my return. 2 months after Antonio had found me in that roadside diner, as I entered my 3rd trimester, the Castellani family made their move, not against Antonio's business interests this time, but against his family, against me. I was in the garden, enjoying the afternoon sunshine, while sketching preliminary designs for a mural in the nursery, when the first bullet struck one of my security guards. The second shattered a terracotta pot inches from where I sat. What followed was a blur of motion and noise. Guards materialized from seemingly nowhere, surrounding me in a protective formation as they hustled me toward the house. Gunfire echoed through the previously peaceful gardens as Antonio's men engaged the attackers who had somehow breached the perimeter. I was rushed to a panic room I hadn't known existed, hidden behind a bookcase in Antonio's study. The reinforced door had barely sealed behind me and my 2 guards when my phone rang. Antonio, already informed of the attack. "Are you hurt?" he demanded without preamble, his voice tight with controlled fury. "No," I assured him, still shaking from adrenaline. "We're secure in the panic room. Stay there until I arrive," he ordered. "I'm 10 minutes out. Additional security is already on the way." By the time Antonio reached the estate, the attack had been repelled. 3 of his men were injured, 1 critically. 4 of the Castellani's hired guns were dead, 2 captured alive. When the panic room door finally opened, Antonio stood there, his expression more terrifying than I had ever seen it. Behind the cold fury in his eyes lurked something else, raw fear unlike anything I had witnessed in him before. He pulled me into his arms with desperate urgency, his hands moving over me as if confirming for himself that I was truly unharmed. When he finally spoke, his voice was ragged. "This is why," he said, his arms tightening around me. "This is why I need you here, protected. This is the reality of our world, Sophia." In that moment, with the evidence of that reality still playing out across the estate, medics treating the wounded, security teams securing the perimeter, staff shaken by the violence that had invaded their workplace, I couldn't argue with him. The danger was real, immediate, and would follow our family regardless of whether I accepted it or not. That night, as security teams patrolled the grounds in doubled numbers and Antonio made calls I deliberately didn't listen to, I made my decision, not out of fear or capitulation, but out of clarity. Our daughter would be born into this world whether I wished it or not. The only choice I truly had was whether she would face its dangers with both parents united or divided. I found Antonio in the nursery, standing by the window that now featured bulletproof glass, his silhouette rigid with tension. When I entered, he turned, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I'm staying," I said simply. "Not just because you found me or because I have nowhere else to go. I'm choosing to stay." Relief washed over his face, followed quickly by wariness. "Why?" "Because our daughter deserves parents who aren't at war with each other," I explained. "Because running didn't work, and because—" I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. "Because despite everything, I never stopped loving you. Not the criminal, not the businessman, but the man. The complicated, impossible man who exists beneath those roles." Antonio crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands cradling my face with unexpected gentleness. "I will protect you both with my life," he vowed. "Whatever it takes, whatever changes I need to make, I don't want you to change who you are," I interrupted. "I just want honesty between us. No more secrets, no more sanitized version of your world. If I'm going to be part of this life, I need to understand it completely." "You have my word," he promised, his forehead resting against mine. "And I want out of the day-to-day operations," I continued. "Legitimate businesses only. Our daughter won't be raised in ignorance like I was, but she won't be directly involved in anything illegal either. That's my condition." Antonio nodded, accepting my terms without hesitation. "Done." As his lips found mine for the first time since my return, I knew our path forward would never be simple. The man I loved would always walk the line between two worlds, the legitimate businessman and the shadow ruler. Our daughter would inherit a legacy complicated by power, danger, and moral ambiguity. But we would face it together, eyes open, no more illusions between us. And in that honesty, I found a freedom more real than any I had discovered in running. 3 months later, Aria Sofia Ricci was born in our home, with Antonio holding my hand through every contraction. When he held our daughter for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, I saw the truth that had always existed beneath the layers of power and control. Love, fierce, protective, and absolute, was the foundation of everything Antonio did. It was both his greatest weakness and his most formidable strength. And now, it was the bond that would hold our family together, come what may.